Thank you, Excellency, Consul General Pogrowski, Mr. Roberts, Chairman Trigg, President Lundholm, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be here this morning, and I must say, yesterday I left a little bit before the end of the party. I think I wasn't going to measure up to the capacity of Swedes to party all night long, but it was a wonderful evening yesterday, very, very inspiring. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the borders between global and public goods, the border between global public goods and private goods is being blurred. It's being blurred by the rise of the sharing economy, by new ways of managing data, including big data, by an increasing internalization of environmental and social concerns into the value chain, by the globalization of large companies, the sourcing of inputs that have become existential to our lives, and by new ways of waging conflict. With over 7 billion of us on this planet and growing, we are connected in ways that are obvious and ways that are subtle. At the United Nations, we look at hunger, for example, as but one face of poverty. Discrimination, poor health, unequal access to safe drinking water, education and lack of opportunities are all interlinked, and they are interlinked challenges faced by the poor. A contagious virus can hop on a plane and be in another continent in a matter of hours. Harmful pollution from one part of the earth is interlinked on the other side of the earth with a region's failed harvest and a flooded small island. From the clothes that we wear to the components that enable our smartphones and our cars and the food that we eat, chances are they were manufactured or produced across the globe in facilities, in fields, under conditions that may lack safety standards and social protections for their workers. Perhaps the next country of origin for an overwhelming movement of migrants, or the crucible for the radicalization of young people desperate with the lack of prospects they face. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world interconnected to an unprecedented level. A world of changes so profound and rapid that no country and no company can stand alone. And yet, at times, we are still misled by the seemingly endless nature of our global public goods. Take, for example, our planet's oceans. This endless reservoir of 1.3 billion cubic kilometers covering over 70% of the Earth's surface and containing 97% of the Earth's water. Its size and abundance is very misleading, as we are 7.5 billion people to share it. That means that every 5 of you have to share 1 cubic kilometer of ocean. This volume generates over half of the oxygen we breathe and the seafood we consume. It absorbs our sewage, our garbage, our spilled oil, and 1/4 of the carbon dioxide we produce. As a global community, we face an array of global tests. These tests boil down to the fundamental challenge of making enlightened decisions today and tomorrow that will place people and planet on course for a better future. When individuals share a seemingly free common good, like oceans, or forests, or air, or peace, we need to come up with an agreed approach to managing it, not just at a national level, not just among rich or among friendly countries, but among all. And this approach cannot only be agreed among diplomats and government officials. Ladies and gentlemen, I was invited here to speak about food. The truth is, we can no longer look at food in isolation. That is the centerpiece of my presentation this morning. On September the 25th, 2015, last year, the leaders of the 193 member states of the United Nations agreed by adopting the transformative 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, containing the 17 development goals that you can see there on the screen. The purpose of my visit here this morning is not only to address food consumption and production, but to share with you my enthusiasm for what the 17 development goals can do for humanity. I'm here to ask you to join in our effort in achieving these transformative goals through the way we eat and otherwise. The adoption of the SDGs, as they are known in short, was a historic moment in the history of the United Nations. It brought the leaders of the world together with civil society organizations and interest groups, with private sector companies, academics, and many individuals to chart a sustainable path in the common pursuit of a healthier world. These Sustainable Development Goals resulted from the most inclusive policy dialogue the United Nations has ever organized. As noted by the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, there can be no going back. We need all hands on deck to implement these goals, which are a shared vision of humanity for transforming our society and protecting our planet. These 17 goals form the basis of a new social contract between the world's leaders and their people. The interlinked goals are supported by a total of 169 targets for which indicators exist and monitoring systems are being put in place. They are an overarching framework, a kind of common roof to the intergovernmental processes and conventions that you probably are familiar with, such as the Paris Agreement and international efforts to counter climate change, the Sendai and the Agenda for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Beijing Platform, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, etc., etc. The Sustainable Development Goals therefore outline a complex effort to end poverty and hunger and ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality in a healthy environment. That is why the goals speak to many common concerns of countries at all levels of development, whether youth unemployment and widening social and economic inequalities, increasing natural disasters and threats from climate change that include industrial pollution, degradation of terrestrial ecosystems, loss of biodiversity, or weakness in social coherence, management of the states, and violence. These are challenges that can hold everyone back, and they are not contained within national boundaries. You know the proverb, you give a man a fish and you feed him for one day, but you teach him to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime. Well, I have news for you. The man already knows how to fish. But the problem is there are no more fishes in the lake because of the chemicals coming down the river from a gold mining operation upstream that is exporting gold to far away in another part of the planet. The lake is shrinking because of climate change, and the local food markets have collapsed because of the dumping of cheap fruits from countries that produce in excess. You see, we are interconnected to an unprecedented extent, not just in the way that our communication, our value chain, and our financial systems are built, but also in the way that negative externalities can no longer be contained by national borders or by firewalls in our internet systems. The new agenda recognizes this change by moving beyond a strategy that was created just to develop poor countries to a universal plan applicable to all. And probably the most significant change in paradigm brought about by this new agenda is the realization that if a significant economic or social group is left behind, our development is not sustainable. So there is a redefinition of sustainability. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development therefore includes a commitment to leave no one behind, including in terms of access to sufficient and nutritious food. Indeed, we are well beyond measuring poverty only in GDP terms. In a manner of speaking, the 169 targets underpinning these 17 goals are 169 ways to explain how no one is to be left behind. And if today is the first time you hear about these goals, I invite you to check out some of the websites that deal with these. You can also go on my Twitter account, @ThomasGass in one word, where I've just pinned a first tweet where you can click on it and you can see that these goals are actually clickable. They're not just lofty sentences, they're 169 agreements that were negotiated word by word, comma by comma, among 193 member states, and that's why they're so powerful. And by the way, your Crown Princess Victoria is one of the champions, one of the SDG advocates, and we're very proud to work with her quite closely on this. Your Prime Minister as well, by the way, he's also a champion of the SDGs. These goals shine a spotlight on the world's biggest issues and our collective ability to address them. This represents a catalyst for innovation and an opportunity for new forms of partnerships, because it's not just governments who have come on board for the SDGs, it's also business. So can we fix this world by eating differently? The simple answer is no. But the way we eat, especially in post-industrial societies, is certainly one of the root causes of the severe challenges we are facing and requires urgent attention, as the chairman has already pointed out. Ladies and gentlemen, $1 trillion worth of food is lost annually to waste. Land degradation, declining soil fertility, unsustainable water use, overfishing, and marine environment degradation are contributing to increased stresses on the natural resource base needed to supply food. With the current population trends, it is predicted that 3 planets of Earth will be needed to maintain current lifestyles by 2050. So it's another version of the same example that you, Mr. Trigg, were mentioning. That gives a certain urgency to Mahatma Gandhi's warning that the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. At the same time, the food sector accounts for 30% of global energy consumption and 22% of global greenhouse gases. Natural disasters are driving millions of people from their homes. Climate change and shrinking biodiversity are life-threatening trends. Let's face it, we are not at peace with nature. In the coming years, the stability of our food and agricultural systems will be severely tested. We saw it already in the devastating effects of El Niño in Africa and Latin America, and most recently in Haiti, which is facing a major food crisis from the devastation caused by Hurricane Matthew. Distinguished participants, it is urgent to consider the big picture, namely that food is not just carbs, protein and fibers that we consume to sustain our metabolism, or that we make tasty and attractive to elate our senses and emotions. Food is one of those strands that connects humanity with the planet and with itself across countries, continents, cultures, and across time. If we pull too hard on this strand, it will lead to disaster in another place or at another time. But the more we understand and acknowledge the linkages and allow this knowledge to influence our behavior, the more sustainable and satisfying our development becomes. If this is to be the era of sustainable development, we need to turn the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals into action. Several of these SDG targets, for those of you who have already clicked on it, are highly relevant to food, you will see, such as those in Goal 12 that set to halve global food wastes at retail and consumer levels and reduce food losses along production and supply chains, including post-harvest losses. We will have countries every year actually reporting at the United Nations on how they are doing on reducing these food losses, for example. And concrete solutions exist. They incentivize us to eat more local, more seasonal. They make transparent through labels and other means whether the food we eat was produced in an environmentally respectful and socially fair way. The 3 R's, to reduce, to reuse, to recycle, are critical principles underpinning the achievement of sustainable consumption and production, that is Goal 12. But there are also several relevant targets related to procurement systems, to education, and to the way we manage energy. Education for healthier living, education for more sustainable living. Those are Goals 4, Goals 2 and 3. But also education to appreciate cultural diversity. There's a target, 4.7. And yes, I mean it. For those of us who are frustrated with the outcome of last week's election, let's eat and drink. Let's eat and drink more meaningfully, more diverse, and together with those we need to learn to appreciate. And yesterday it was very inspiring that Marcus Samuelsson said that a restaurant is the place to restore the community. And I really believe that. And that's what food and food production needs to become for us. Now, one of the opportunities that the SDGs point towards, and which is close to my heart, as you've heard from the ambassador, is a better use of agrobiodiversity. By genetic diversity of crops, I mean their wild relatives, which contain much of the variability and the adaptation that we will need to adapt to future challenges. But I also mean the old varieties and land races that have been domesticated and improved over hundreds and thousands of years, evolving with our culture, our tastes, our industry. Agrobiodiversity is our lifeline to the future. Diversity is basic to resilience. It helps prevent crop devastation caused by changing environmental conditions, and crop diversity makes for better nutrition. And yet, today, a mere 40 crops provide 90% of what we eat. 5 cereal crops make up 60% of the global energy intake. Too many trends and interests lead us to rely on a single genetically uniform crop. Short-term yields may be higher, but we are courting disaster if we fail to safeguard natural diversity among and within crops and among their wild relatives. This is a global challenge. We must join forces internationally. No country has all the diversity it needs to develop sustainable food systems. International cooperation is absolutely essential if we are to protect the foundation of world agriculture and generate new crops. Target 2.5 of the SDG number 2 calls us to maintain genetic diversity of seeds, cultivated plants, farmed and domesticated animals, and their related wild species, including through soundly managed and diversified seed and plant banks at national, regional, and international levels. So all countries have an interest in plant genetic resources. All depend largely on crops that originated elsewhere. In short, crop diversity is a global public good. Losing diversity means losing options for the future. We cannot retrieve what has been lost. We can only safeguard what we have left. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals are not just a set of abstract policies for governments, business, and NGOs. They are practical. They are a matter of personal conviction and passion. Just one person, a family, or a community may seem too small to make a difference, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Everyone's contribution inspires hope. By working together, we can say to the children of this world that the 2030 Agenda is not just a new deal among nations, but a solemn promise to its people and to future generations. Let's make this shared vision of humanity our common cause. Thank you.